the news that we bring to everyone on this channel at this time is that it has gone beyond the wish list of Mr. Netanyahu that Mojtaba Khamenei be assassinated. It has now gone into an operational planning at the highest level. Well, I am today, July the 3rd, joined by my dear friend and colleague Vijay Prashad, who has been traveling all over the world. And I am so anxious to hear his take on what is going on, which I believe is a tectonic shift in the geopolitical ecosystem that has prevailed since the end of the Second World War. We have a lot of news to cover. Vijay has his own unique, very unique perspective, very valuable to us. So I invite you, Vijay. Go ahead, please.
Well, firstly, it's great to be back with you, and the important thing I think with this channel, the transition protocol, as I understand it, is that
Yes.
we are, of course, living in a world of constant motion and movement and shifts and turns, and the important thing is to track it as accurately as possible. Of course, we are talking to each other, and I think we have to this has to be put on the table immediately that this is the funeral week of Ali Khamenei, who was killed, and his funeral is being, commemorated. His life is being commemorated in Iran. Just enormous numbers of people are projected to see what's happening there. This sort of this, I don't know what we call it. This state mourning, is important. But listen, it's not about Ali Khamenei who died earlier this year. It's not about him. It's about what is happening now. I mean, firstly, within Iran, I want to take a few minutes to talk about what's in Iran, because within Iran there are lots of things happening. I mean, there's a lot of reconstruction that will need to happen. There's still some economic turmoil. The population, while fully patriotic and behind the government, has its own needs that have to be met. That has not stopped the Israelis from their own shenanigans. As you saw earlier this week, the Israelis have been trying desperately to scuttle the memorandum of understanding between the Iranians and the United States, a memorandum of understanding which we've previously discussed, is entirely written in language that both sides could utilize to claim a victory, in a sense. Yeah, I mean, it's not the precise legal language because it gives them basically 2 months to sort out some more details. But within this 2 month period, the Israelis are trying to scuttle in any which way the memorandum of understanding. On the one side, the Israelis are putting pressure in Lebanon. I think this is important. They're continuing to press in Lebanon. They don't want to withdraw their troops. They continue to insist that Hezbollah must be destroyed, despite the fact that after heavy bombardment, they continue to see the existence of Hezbollah. It's not going anywhere. It has roots in Lebanese society, in a sense. If Israel wants to get rid of Hezbollah, they're going to have to kill 1 million people. I don't think that's on the card. They couldn't do it in Gaza. They're not going to do it in Lebanon. Hezbollah is going to continue to press on behalf of the Lebanese people to defend their southern line of control with Israel. So there, the Israelis are trying to scuttle the memorandum of understanding. And then, well, as you very well know, the Israelis haven't given up their sense that if they take out more leaders of the government in Iran, that this will either provoke the Iranians to go back on the offensive, or this will somehow get the United States to come forward. And I know we're going to talk specifically about that, but I want to put one more thing on the table, which is that I spoke again to people in the Gulf Arab states, particularly Qatar and one state in the UAE, one of the United Arab Emirates. And what's interesting is these countries have basically decided that the game is up as far as the security umbrella from the United States. And if you look carefully at the memorandum of understanding, it's pretty clear that it's trying to hedge its bets, because any of these states at any point might make a side deal with the Iranians, and they are holding some of the Iranian money that has been frozen. They might unfreeze that money. When Qatar says that they are contemplating the removal of the United States base, in other words, there's a timetable that they are going to lay out for some of the US base to go. I don't think the whole base will go, but there will be some symbolic removal of some troops from Qatar. Don't forget, again, Zulfikar, this is not news, because this is what happened in Saudi Arabia after 1991. The king at that time told the United States that you have to leave Saudi Arabia, and US bases closed down, which is why they expanded in the Gulf Arab states. But in both in Qatar and in the United Arab Emirates, I'm hearing that the talk of side deals with the Iranians is on the table. Now, if these side deals get announced, this is really going to damage the Israeli Abraham Accords plan. They don't want any of these countries to move 1 inch away from what they have declared, which is to have them normalize with Israel, to have them essentially tail US foreign policy. If they go out of that range, this is going to be a problem. So, in that sense, the Israelis are going to mount something quite dramatic in order to try to scuttle the MOU and to prevent, the Gulf Arab states from making side deals with Iran. And I think it's the it's the structural requirements that the Israelis do something dramatic that highlights the kind of things that we are hearing now, that might be on the back burner, and then brought perhaps during this week of the funeral of Ali Khamenei, brought to the front burner.
Well, that's a very good recap for our audiences, which are now global, Vijay, and translated in 12 languages as of a couple of days ago. So many people are hearing everything that you have to say and everything that our colleagues have to say, which is very encouraging, because this is how, in today's world, we're getting the news out. We're not laundering the news, we're getting it out. And I'm very glad to report that some of our news has that we brought out about a week ago, maybe 10 days ago, is now being acknowledged. So so much. So thanks for your perspective. Now I do need to add some of the perspective that I have, which as I have shared with our audiences and yourself, is privileged, and so far we have seen that that privilege that has been extended to us brings to our audiences and to us information that is not elsewhere available. We understand that Israelis are in fact desperate, and they will try desperate measures, and they will try something very dramatic. But on the other hand, we also know that Pakistan has proven itself quite capable. I mean, thankfully to the backing from China and the technology it receives from China, to kill the, to break the kill chain, which we have seen happen. So, uh, what is your view about Israel in the midst of the colossal pressure that is being exerted against it by China, with the front being Pakistan, and with the blessings of Russia, and with these Gulf states finally recognizing that their future does not lie with America, their future lies within the region? What is your view as to what is going to come out of all this?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a very tense moment. Firstly, it is absolutely the week that we have to be very careful with what happens in and around Iran. The Iranian government has said they expect 20 million people to come out in Tehran for the commemoration of Ali Khamenei's funeral. I mean, that's a very large turnout. Even if it's half of that, Zulfikar, it's a very large turnout. It's going to be larger than the turnout for Ayatollah Khomeini, and that says a lot, because Ayatollah Khomeini even though again there are divisions in Iranian society, these people bring out a very large crowd because they are considered to be examples in religious examples, but also political heroes. I mean, Ali Khamenei refused to leave his desk, even though it was very clear the United States was going to target him. It was no great intelligence to bomb his office. He was sitting right there. He had made it very clear. He went to visit the mazar of Ayatollah Khomeini, the grave of Ayatollah Khomeini, before that date, to basic and photographs of that visit to the mazar of Ayatollah Khomeini was broadcast on Iranian television and in newspapers, effectively suggesting he's saying to Ayatollah Khomeini, I'm coming to greet you. He hadn't been to see Ayatollah Khomeini's mazar in a very long time. This was effectively him saying that I'm not going to leave my post. So for that reason, he's highly revered. It's not just for his religious example, the marja role that he plays in Shiism. It's not just his marja role, but also the political role that he didn't leave his post. He effectively said, I will die in station. Again, it's important for people to understand this is no big Mossad intelligence operation. There was no big CIA. He was sitting in his office, for God's sake. I mean, it was a big target on top of the building. He just did not want to leave the post. I think that's a very important thing. So between 20 million, 10 million, very large number of people. I don't know what will eventually come onto the streets during this week, but the Iranians are expecting a lot of people. And the Iranian army commander has said very clearly, we will avenge the enemies who killed Ayatollah Khamenei. I mean, he's made that statement. So times are tense. The successor of Ayatollah Khamenei, his son, is there in Tehran. He was wounded previously. He's there as the supreme leader now. Um, well, will he make an appearance during this funeral? Will he come out in public? If he comes out in public, what will the Israelis do? I mean, will they decide to act without permission from Trump? Will they come with Trump's permission? This is going to not only scuttle the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, but this could, again, the escalation ladder from Iran could increase. I mean, as we've talked before, Iran hasn't pulled the trigger on its close allies in Iraq to hit at the U.S. military bases in the north, in the Kurdish north. I mean, already there are lots of tensions in the Kurdish north. Will the United States allow another assassination, a major assassination? If they do allow that, what will the retaliation be? The MOU will certainly be torn up. I would imagine there's a lot of heartburn in Islamabad this week around the question of the public appearance of the supreme leader. Will he come out in public? Again, what will the Israelis do? Accounts suggest that the Israelis are interested in taking him out. This is not something that I think Mr. Trump would like in this period. I think if we think through what is happening in Washington, Mr. Trump has enough problems. There he is talking to an artificial intelligence version of Teddy Roosevelt to get strength from how to deal with the many challenges in front of him. I don't know if you saw that video of Trump speaking to an AI version of Teddy Roosevelt. Striking little vision of him actually talking to the AI figure from 100 years ago. The great imperialist Teddy Roosevelt. He had these fellows behind him, cosplay versions of the Rough Riders sitting behind him. Not one of them will be willing to step on Iranian soil, just to put it quite bluntly. I don't think they want to get picked off one by one. They're quite happy in a kind of Disneyland version of the Rough Riders, but they don't want to be out there, taking fire from the Revolutionary Guards or even patriotic Iranian citizens. You remember at the start of the war, shepherds were trying to shoot down drones and so on. The patriotic Iranians will pick up their hunting rifles and hit at U.S. troops. So United States doesn't want the escalation. But will the Israelis do it in order to ensure that the goals of Mr. Netanyahu will be met? I mean, he was recently seen at the start of the Maccabee games in Tel Aviv with his wife, yelling at the staff, saying that how dare you allow us to be humiliated? We should have come in through the VIP entrance and so on. He is addicted to power. Former Shin Bet, the Israeli intelligence chief, spoke to Christiane Amanpour. She said Mr. Netanyahu is holding Israel hostage because of his own personal problems with the law and so on. The behavior of Sarah Netanyahu was really a test of all this. What will the Israelis do, really? That's the question on the table. It's not what will the Iranians do. The Iranians are quite content with the progress of the negotiations with the United States. I don't think they don't want to tear this deal up. They are content. I think the Gulf Arab states are pretty content with a new balance of power, new equilibrium in the Gulf. I think they are not going to be, worried about this. They would even be okay with paying fees. Remember, the Gulf Arab states have moved far beyond simply the export of raw crude. They now process the crude. That's why fertilizer comes out of the Gulf Arab states. That's why natural gas comes. They are up the value chain of petroleum products. So they don't mind the toll that the Iranians will extract. They are willing to, take the hit with the new equilibrium. So neither the United States nor the Iranians nor the Gulf Arab states want to threaten this agreement or this sort of peace for now. But for the Israelis, this is perhaps the time to strike, and that's what I worry about. Again, as I said, it's a funeral week. Will the supreme leader make an appearance? What will the Israelis do?
Well, let me bring to you the reporting that I have from privileged sources again, that I cannot name, but so far have been proven to be accurate. In fact, accurate far beyond our expectations and well ahead of public reporting on this matter. And and as you know, China is very firmly behind what Pakistan is doing. I mean, our audiences know that from the reporting that we have done and from the acknowledgement that Iran has done of Pakistan's role by publicly thanking Pakistan in their parliament. I mean, almost never happens. So the view that I bring to you, Vijay, for your understanding and analysis and then discussion for our audiences, is that Pakistan is very firmly engaged at a very deep level with Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Oman, principal countries, and beginning to get engaged with Turkey and Egypt and Bahrain even, and they are not going to allow uh, Israel to scuttle what has already happened and will do everything within their abilities to prevent that from coming from fruition in case Israel decides to move. This is the news that they have felt, the people who give us the news, to make it public. Perhaps one of their many ways in which they want to stop something horrible from happening, because they know how difficult it has been to get here and how important it is to stay here. I mean, as you know very well, and as our observers know very well, that this is a tectonic shift. This is really a tectonic shift. The loss of the Gulf Arab states to the United States and to the West is an extraordinary loss. It's an extraordinary loss because that means the loss of the petrodollar.
Hmm.
That means a lot, and it means a complete rearrangement of the geopolitical order as we know it, and it means the emergence of China, and it means the filling of the vacuum by the net provider of security, which would be Pakistan. I mean, that is a major, major shift. And I think that unless Israel manages to scuttle that, this is this is a fait accompli. This is something that is going to happen. And the only way Israel can scuttle this is by assassinating Mojtaba Khamenei, which is why the news that we bring to everyone on this channel at this time is that it has gone beyond the wish list of Mr. Netanyahu that Mojtaba Khamenei be assassinated. It has now gone into an operational planning at the highest level. I mean, that is really the news. That it is no longer a wish list. This is a plan, a real plan. As everybody knows, that the Shia community in the world, which is very, very strong, looks upon the leadership in Iran as Velayat Faqih, which means, which means a lot, which means everything to the Shia, to the Muslim Shia sect, which is a very, very strong sect, and about 25% of all the Muslims, about a billion people in the world, which means that these are the true leaders of this community. So this is not understood by the United States or by the West, that these are just not Iranian leaders. This is the Walayat Faqih. So I think that it will be an extraordinary moment if Israel attempts this, not even succeed, but just attempt it. Almost tantamount to the assassination that led to the First World War. So back to you,
Yeah, well,
Vijay.
I just want to make a set of points that are to some extent related. I mean, the first one is that it is certainly the case that over the past 2 decades, Israeli policy or Israeli doctrine has evolved a great deal. I mean, this is important to bear in mind. At least in the past couple of years, I mean, Israel has believed that if they take out the apex of organizations, the organizations it regards as existential threats, then somehow the threat disappears. We add to that the assassination of Syed Hassan Nasrallah of Hezbollah in Lebanon, and then, of course, Ali Khamenei in February 2026. These so-called decapitation strikes, so where they hit the leader, is something Israel has come to believe has a knock-on effect. Now, the knock-on effect is nowhere visible because neither Hezbollah nor the Iranian government have collapsed. So, I mean, I don't understand this because even when you take the case of Hamas, Israel has repeatedly gone after Hamas leaders or Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. They've done decapitation strike after decapitation strike. The organization flourishes. It doesn't die out. I mean, it revives, it comes back, and so on. So this doesn't work. I mean, you'll go back to the attempted assassination of Khalid Mishal in Damascus, long time back. I mean, one after the other, these decapitation strikes have either succeeded or not, and it's made no impact. In other words, Israeli doctrine, which is about decapitation, is not working, but they continue on it. Second issue is that the broader objectives of Israeli policy, whether it's going to attempt a assassination of Mojtaba Khamenei, the supreme leader, or not, the Israeli broader objectives are uncertain. I mean, is Israeli strategy focused on deterrence and containment in the period after this MOU or Memorandum of Understanding has been signed? In that case, another decapitation won't be worthwhile. Why would you do a decapitation if your strategy is containment of Iran? If Iran is willing to dial down its nuclear materials, if it's willing to allow more inspections and so on, why would you do a decapitation strike? They're going to tear up an agreement which, from the standpoint of containment, is pretty good. Why would you do that? On the other hand, if their objective shifts towards basically preventing the reconstitution of Iran's capacities and so on, they think they might succeed with another strike. So this is important. That's the second point. That whereas Israeli doctrine has been focused on decapitation strikes, the second point is, well, let's see what their strategic goals are. I mean, if indeed there's a strategic discussion in Israel, is it to maintain the containment regime, in which case, no point? Or do they believe that they can actually decapitate and then the regime is going to fall? Something that didn't happen when Mujtaba Khamenei's father was killed. It didn't collapse. The government remained in place and so on. Then there's got to be the discussion within the Israeli highest establishment, within the planners, whether removing Mojtaba Khamenei would significantly degrade Iran's decision making or military capacity. I mean, if they conclude that another assassination would simply strengthen the cohesion of the Iranian government and people, or produce another successor more to the national liking in Iran, much stronger than Mojtaba Khamenei, well, that's a backfire on your part. So Israeli war planners must be discussing this. I will say that the United States is an important variable in this. I don't think there's an appetite right now in the US for the Israelis to come in and at this level scuttle the memorandum of understanding. So the other point is the US remains a variable. I don't think the United States would like this. Would the United States allow it if the Israelis insist? They allow a lot of things that the Israelis end up doing anyway, so it's not clear. But I want to say something about Iranian preparation. You had already talked about in our last conversation about Iran being able to essentially, put off or disable the Israeli use of artificial intelligence and other surveillance technologies to find where people are at the highest form of leadership and so on. This technology shared by the Pakistanis and so on. Yeah, that may be so. But the Iranians have done something very, very clever for this funeral. And I want to underline that. What they've done, firstly, is that they have decided that this funeral is not happening in one city. It's not happening, there's no concentration risk. What in security studies you call a concentration risk. Let's have a big funeral in Tehran and let's have all the leaders at one dais. So we present the Israelis with our leadership on a platter. Here's Mojtaba Khamenei, here's the prime minister, here's the this, here's the that, the assembly of elders, experts, everybody sitting there. One hit and they're all gone. No, they're not. They have basically decentralized the funeral. There'll be funerals in Tehran, there'll be funerals in Isfahan, there'll be funerals in Qom, all across the country, and their leadership is going to be spread out. You don't know who's where when. This is important. They've planned this very well. It's going to be over 7 days. We don't know when people are going to make an appearance. Whether the assembly of experts or the Revolutionary Guard leadership are going to make an appearance, we don't know. We don't even know if Mojtaba Khamenei will make an appearance. But there will be a lot of foreigners there, a lot of leaders from different countries. Most likely, Mojtaba Khamenei, if he makes an appearance, which I think is likely, will be there with a lot of other either heads of government or with high representatives from various countries. I don't think the Israelis will be willing to risk something where Mojtaba Khamenei is there on the dais and right next to him is a high representative from China, somebody from here. So I just don't think even the Israelis have the guts for something like that. I really do not think so. I think the Iranians have thought this through by all accounts, and let's not get into where these accounts sit, but by all accounts, security has been very tight for this funeral. So I just feel like, yes, I quite agree that the Israelis will be considering it, will think about it, but they better think twice, 3 times, 4 times for the reasons I just outlined. Number one, again, just to recap, I don't think they have a strategy for this. I think the Israelis have perhaps a technology, or they feel they do. They don't have a strategy. What's the end game? I think the United States will not authorize willingly a strike. They may authorize it under duress, but not willingly. This is not a good strike for them. And then finally, I think the Iranians are going to defend their leadership. I think it's going to be hard to hit them. I think the Israelis sometimes are overconfident about their abilities. Okay, I mean, we have seen this over and over again. There's a legend and myth of Mossad. Mossad is more legend than reality. Yeah. I mean, and sometimes the critics of Mossad contribute to the status of Mossad's, legendary brilliance and their ability to. There are so many botched operations, Zulfiqar, they are just not in the public domain. We have heard about these botched operations. They couldn't kill Khalid Mishal. I interviewed him in Doha, Qatar afterwards. Yeah, they couldn't kill him. I mean, it was a botched operation. I don't know why we give so much importance to Mossad, saying, Mossad this, Mossad that. They make as many, if not more, errors than they do successes. There are these mystery writers like Daniel Silva and others that contribute to this allure of Mossad. Yeah, the hours in, so 10 8 hours, I don't remember what it was, of in Entebbe. Remember that book that
Yes,
we
yes.
all read? Yeah,
Propaganda.
when,
Yes,
yeah, it was direct propaganda, direct
yes.
propaganda. In fact, Benjamin Netanyahu's brother was killed in Entebbe. They lost airmen, soldiers, and special forces in the attempt to free the hijacked people sitting in Entebbe airport. They lost soldiers, but that was not highlighted. It was Netanyahu's brother who was killed there. So let's not fall into the idea that they are some amazing intelligence service. They make as many errors as they goof up as much as anybody. In this case, I think we need to say quite directly, if they are in fact, if this reporting is true, that they are in fact operationalizing a hit on Mujtaba Khamenei. I think strategically bad idea. I think for the sake of the world, very bad idea. And I think their chances of failure very high.
Well, I just want to add one additional factual point to everything that you said, and obviously second everything that you just said. Every time Israel has come into contact with Pakistan military forces, I'm not saying that because I was raised in my earlier years in Pakistan, even though I was born in India. But I've lived in this country for over 4 decades. I don't say that because of that, but just as a factual matter. Every time Israeli defense forces have come into contact with Pakistani defense forces, Israel has lost. In fact, the ace, that was recognized by the fighting aces in the United States, was a Pakistani fighter pilot who I think downed three or four Israeli jets, the only one to do so. And this time the Pakistanis are very heavily engaged with the Iranian security forces, very, very heavily engaged, directly under the command of the field marshal, whom the Iranians have acknowledged as their friend. So even if they try, I think the chances of success are very, very low. In fact, non-existent. This is my assessment based on everything I know. So I think it will be a very foolish idea. What I want to hear from you, Vijay, is with Israel acting as a bad actor, playing the role of a really bad actor on the world stage repeatedly, over and over again, and does not have anything to show for it, especially with this most recent display of bad acts with the attack on Iran, where Iran has emerged as a strategic victor. I mean, what is next for Israel, assuming they fail? I mean, I would bet on the side of them failing. I don't think they'll succeed. I think that despite the heavy pushback that they are doing, despite all their so-called, invincibility, they are not going to succeed. And what will happen is the eventual demise of the American influence in the region. It might take, a year. It might take 2 years, but the United States is not going to be a dominant force. This is a bold prediction that I am happy to make. And there will be a new power structure there, not by the United States, but by the Chinese. I mean, not in the same way at all. China does not want to be a hegemon. China just wants to be recognized as what it is, already what it is. So, if all of this comes to pass, you are a very astute observer of what goes on all over the world, but especially in that part of the world, Vijay. And I think our audiences would love to know what you think. Well, 6 months from today, when this fails, what Israel is trying to do fails? What happens?
Yeah, firstly, it's been now almost a decade that the standing of the United States has been falling in the global South countries. I mean, I have the fortune as a part of my job to meet leaders of countries in Africa, Asia, Latin America, former presidents, prime ministers, but also sitting current presidents, prime ministers, and so on. And I can tell you that privately, heads of government, but also their envoys, ambassadors, and so on, privately, they all shake their heads at the United States. What is it doing with climate financing, blocking things? Since 2019, the United States has blocked the sitting of an arbitration panel in the World Trade Organization, trying to scuttle arbitration between states around the World Trade Organization, which the US impaneled and created in 1994-95 under the leadership of Bill Clinton. Now, since 2019, they're not permitting it to function. That was Trump, then Biden, now Trump again. So people around the world, they shake their heads and say, United States is not a reliable actor. It's not a reliable actor. The attack on Iran is just, the tip of a very, very large iceberg. It's not a reliable actor. Why is the US going after China? Why is the US doing this? Why is the US doing that? Why are they lying about this country, that country? I mean, the standing of the United States declining. Secondly, China right now, their investment is about 30% of the GDP. Yeah, it's high, maybe even up to near 40%. Yeah, they are investing a lot in the country. They are essentially capturing a lot of the surplus and plowing it back into infrastructure, into the new productive forces. So the economic legitimacy of China is very high, very high. And that's leading the way. The economic legitimacy of China. In the United States, they would be lucky if their investments, net capital formation, entered in the teens. I mean, in Britain, manufacturing is 8% of GDP. There is no way that the successor of Keir Starmer, Andy Burnham, will be able to lift that. In Italy, it's 12%. Even to go from 8 to 12%, I don't think Britain is going to succeed. Economically, the combined West, the collective West, has no legitimacy. They don't have the capital that they can put together, yeah, to invest in our countries. They're not going to be building bridges and dams and power plants and factories and helping us industrialize. They are blocking, in fact, the establishment of the theory of an industrial policy for third world countries, yeah, global South countries. They're blocking it. China is coming in saying, we would like you to industrialize. We'll invest. We'll give you loans. We'll give you currency swaps. So economically, US doesn't have, and the collective West, there's no economic legitimacy. Secondly, diplomatic legitimacy. You remember when Russia entered Ukraine, Joe Biden gave a speech saying never has a UN member state attacked another UN member state illegally after World War II. Yeah, when the UN was founded. He said this directly into a microphone. Okay, people say Joe Biden, but US people, including his Secretary of State, repeated that. They conveniently forgot in 2003 they invaded Iraq illegally. There was no UN Security Council resolution. I mean, there's no diplomatic legitimacy. People know United States is clownish when it comes to diplomacy. Yeah, they were in the middle of very, very close negotiations with Iran, where the shepherding of the negotiation was being done by Oman. And then they bomb Iran when the negotiation had almost been settled. That came from the Omani foreign minister. So, diplomatic legitimacy of the US is down. The institutional legitimacy is zero. How the US is utilizing the International Monetary Fund to continue and to strangle African countries is really a sight to behold. Grief Chelva and I have a book coming out this month called How the International Monetary Fund Strangles Africa. Yeah, we document in detail the institutional lack of legitimacy of the US run institutions, because the IMF right now is fully pressured by the US Treasury Department. Meanwhile, the BRICS countries are trying to create new institutional legitimacy, through their own institution, including through Forget the BRICS, including through the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in Asia, including through the RCEP, largest trade bloc that straddles both sides of the Pacific Ocean. I mean, these institutional developments are the counter to the collapsing institutional legitimacy of the collective West. And finally, I already said economic legitimacy, diplomatic legitimacy, institutional legitimacy. Then there's development and technological legitimacy. Who's building the best high speed rail? By the way, it's not just China, it's also India. Indian public sector firms have built high speed rail that can go over 200 kilometers an hour. It's not as fast as the Chinese, but it's still much faster than what the Europeans are building today. Technological legitimacy. China is building the best phones, the best smart this, smart that. Talk about chips and so on. They once they were sanctioned, they made their own chips. Developmental and technological legitimacy. Nobody's looking at the US for modernization advice. They are looking to Asia, to China, to Indonesia, India, other countries in the East. They are looking at us. They are not looking at the West. So when it comes to diplomatic legitimacy, economic legitimacy, institutional legitimacy, development, technological legitimacy, the West, collective West, just doesn't have its shoes on. And even Japan, and here's the special thing for us, even Japan is trying to settle things with China. Even Japan, they are moving in their own way against the compulsions placed by the South Koreans against North Korea. Japan is looking to have an opening to North Korea, to open dialogue and so on. That is very interesting. You may have seen recently that U.S. publications have been writing about the fast pace of economic growth in North Korea. These magazine articles coming out, very interesting. What provokes them? Okay, it's a fact of high growth rate. That's fine. That may provoke it to some extent, but it's also provoked by the fact that in the US security order around China, there are cracks and breaks. And Japan's attempt to open a dialogue with North Korea is very significant, needs to be watched closely. We will be watching it closely. Collective West is losing legitimacy. Now, that doesn't mean, again, just to reiterate, that doesn't mean that they don't control the channels of information. Yeah. They control the channels that you and I use. They are the ones who control the bulk of the world's satellites, the bulk of the world's undersea cables. If they want, they can slow down this upload and download speed of our channel. They can do all these things. They can do everything short of directly banning us from YouTube. They may shadow ban us by slowing the transmission and so on. They control information flows. That's true. They can also destroy small countries. They can come and bomb a country. That's true. Can't win a war. I tell you one last thing about the long funeral of former Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei in Iran, just to make this point. A funeral is a very delicate moment. And if the Israelis are seriously thinking of striking in this period, they're charting new terrain. I looked into this a little bit. Have there been strikes on comparable funerals? Nobody has attempted a comparable strike at a funeral. There'll be enormous numbers of civilians, not necessarily IRGC people there. Lots of ordinary Iranians will want to come to bid goodbye to their marja, to the person they emulate. There will be very large number of civilians. There will be foreign guests on the podium. We have not seen a strike like this, if there is one, before. The previous funeral strike was a Saudi strike in Sana'a, Yemen in 2016, but that was not a head of state. That was a family funeral that was struck. We've seen many of these. You'll remember the United States drone struck so many marriages and funerals up in Waziristan during the so-called global war on terror. Families celebrating a wedding or family mourning the loss of a loved one, and bam, drone strike, whole family wiped out. You remember these were also being done by the US in Afghanistan, where they then went in and they removed bullets from the walls to say it wasn't us, it was somebody else, when in fact they had landed, gone into a wedding hall and wiped out the whole family. Yeah, they later came and took, and Stanley McChrystal came with a goat and so on to make amends there. Okay, those were terrible funeral strikes, but they were not against a marja. They were not against the head of a government. There is a certain protocol, I think, that would be violated and open the door to all kinds of possibilities. That means that if the Israelis have a big celebration or anything and the head of government is there, would a missile be appropriate then? I mean, this would really open and break down, I think, certain protocols of the international order that were not established by us but were established by the collective West. At a time of a national funeral for a leader, you can't strike. There's a sort of understanding, on the table, and I think Israelis, if they tried it now, would violate that understanding.
That was an excellent summary of summation of everything we have been talking about, Vijay. Thank you so much for allowing all of this discussion to take place. I have one additional comment, even though our time is coming up, that I would like to present to you because it is an important one, and it has come to us from our privileged reporting, and that is that if that Iranian leadership has said very clearly to the United States, very clearly, that you push us against the wall, we are going to tear up the MOU, we are going to abandon any conversation with you, and we are back to our nuclear enrichment program. And unsaid was the fact that they would develop a bomb. I mean that those exact words were not mentioned, but anybody with any intelligence, would understand that that would be the next course of action. So that is something that is possible if Iran is pushed against the wall, which a strike of this nature would accomplish. What do you think?
I mean, firstly, if you look at this from the Iranian perspective, they have literally nothing to lose as a government. If a strike of if a second supreme leader is killed in less than 6 months, their retaliation will have to escalate, and that's a very serious proposition. And that's why I say that I think the pressure right now, coming from Doha, coming from Dubai, coming from the other Emirate states, coming from Bahrain, perhaps coming from Riyadh, the pressure from these countries on the US is probably great. And I think this is the unsaid of our moment. It's that these countries cannot afford to see an escalation from Iran. They just can't afford to see it, because this could be devastating for them. I mean, you think about this, that currently the Iranians have struck mainly military targets in Qatar, mainly. Qatar has expanded its ability to take crude oil and produce all kinds of products. If Iran decides to strike the industrial capacity of Qatar, it would put Qatar back enormously, devastating for Qatar. They can't afford an escalation, and if Iran decides, well, we have nothing to lose, they seem to want to continue on, and we're going to really up the pressure. They are going to hit if I was in Iran, I would say, okay, we'll send a whole bunch of missiles into Israel, basically to send a message that we can penetrate the Iron Dome. But strategically, we're going to really hit the Qataris, the Emiratis, and so on. We're going to destroy the industrial capacity. And then let's see what's going to happen. Okay, let the United States come and bomb Iranian industrial capacity. It doesn't seem to matter in the short term. You see, because they're going to say that look at what you've just done. There's blood on the streets. Our conservatism towards war is not going to provoke to stop you doing anything. I mean, you today you killed a second supreme leader. Tomorrow you can just wipe us out. We're going to accelerate. And I think that is something to put on the table. That the reticence in Washington is, I think, also coming from pressure that has amped up from the Gulf Arab states. I don't think we should underestimate that the Gulf Arab states recognize that an acceleration from Iran would be absolutely existential for them. And I think, therefore, do they green light an Israeli strike? I don't think so. Do they allow the United States, given the fact that you and I are talking about, reports of a potential, elimination of the supreme leader in Iran, two in less than 6 months? I find it very difficult to imagine that these intelligence services don't have the same kind of information. And if they do, I think lots of phones are ringing in Washington trying to reach Donald Trump and tell him that, look, all bets are off if this happens. I mean, certainly the Abraham Accords can't go through, and Israel is going to, find itself extremely isolated, surrounded by Arab countries. Okay, the supreme leader and the Iranians are not Arabs, but I don't think that really matters when the missiles fire and strike the industrial capacity of the Gulf Arab states, because the gravy train for everybody runs through the Gulf Arab states. I mean, who is funding the Egyptian government right now? Who is funding, who is upholding the Syrian government right now? If the gravy train stops from the Gulf Arab states, these states are in serious jeopardy. I mean, how is Mr. Sisi going to manage the tens of millions of people who are so frustrated with the situation in Egypt, but are basically being bought off by the money coming in from Saudi Arabia and other places? If that stops because the industrial capacity is damaged, how are these governments going to go forward? I mean, the Israelis are foolhardy. And that's what I really want to say, is that the knock-on effects, there may not be an attack from Egypt on Israel. There may not be anything like that. But Mr. Sisi is going to see a lot of turmoil in Egypt. Can he contain it? Who's going to put the money into Egypt, to help bribe the Egyptian population to stand down? If the Gulf Arab states aren't sending the money, is the United States, do they have the money to send the Egyptians? I don't think so. Will the French do it? I don't think so. They're not even stabilizing the Lebanese government. How are they going to stabilize the much larger Egyptian population? It's been Saudi money coming in. It's been other Emirati money coming in. What's going to happen to the war in Sudan? UAE interests will be finished there. So will Egyptian interests. So I'm just saying that the pressure on Washington from the Gulf Arab states to contain Israel is very high. And we should not underestimate that. I want to reiterate what I said to you earlier, which is that just as I say, we should not exaggerate the genius of Mossad or anything like that, intelligence service which fails as much as it succeeds. Let's not exaggerate the ability of the United States to stop Israel, but at the same time, let's not underestimate the ability of the Gulf Arab states to tell the United States, look, you allow them to do something like that, and the retaliation hits the industrial capacity of the Gulf Arab states. We can't keep the Egyptian population at bay any longer. They are going to be running into Sinai, across Rafah, into Gaza, and I don't know what the Egyptian military will do.
Fantastic, fantastic analysis, and I want to thank you for providing us with extraordinary analysis, Vijay, because this is something that really gets to the heart of everything that we have been trying to bring to our audiences, and they are global right now. The last video that we did reached almost 200,000 people. Very happy about that. So kindly hit the subscribe button and like button. Speaking to our audiences everywhere. When you hear this, because you are not going to find this quality of analysis that goes to the heart of what is actually going on, so that you understand what is going on anywhere else. And that is the purpose of our channel. That is the purpose of bringing on guests who are founding members of our channel, not just contributors like Vijay Prashad. So thank you very much, Vijay. I'm going to hit the stop button right now because it is past our time, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you so very
Absolutely.
much.
Amazing. Thanks a
But,
lot, Zulfiqar.
but keep that on until it fully uploads.
No
Thank you.
problem.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.